I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. So 2.5 hours ago, I said to Mark, I think we should talk about the Wave series books that you've been into lately because you're referencing them. And although I feel like I remember you talking about them already on the podcast, I think maybe you haven't because people are asking. And since then, I've been sitting here with a microphone in front of me while Mark reads the books cover to cover.
I'm reviewing some key points. I feel like
just straight in a professor mode.
A professor just reviewing before his course. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually looking at a Carlos Castaneda book right now that the Wave series references, and there's a really good paragraph in here that I have the snippet in the Wave book, but I was trying to get more context from it from the real book, which I haven't read this full Carlos Castaneda book yet.
But you might be done before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm scanning, so I'm not. But I'm realizing how good this book probably is, and I want to read it. So I definitely am getting distracted. All right, well, I'll just put this down because I will just not stop. Yeah, the Wave, it's funny because I feel like I've, like, ad nauseum am talking about the Wave series, and I felt like I've explained it, but I mean, and I think I did on this podcast once or twice. I definitely did on my Patreon, like my book review. I did like a deeper dive of it. I guess.
And I feel like, I don't know, did we do a Patreon episode in my head? We talked about that.
Well, and I'm talking about it on sessions all the time too. I'm always referencing it. So I feel like I'm annoying about repeating it, but maybe there's new people that are listening and don't know. And so it can't hurt to repeat some of it, I guess.
I get into a perspective, I guess we both do this, but like I get into a perspective as someone who talks into fucking microphones constantly and on sessions. And while I'm holding that perspective, I feel so annoying because I just, everything's through that lens, right? But then I will take a crazy left turn into something else, and that will still be a part of my perspective, but I'm not just the way that I reference the book Robes and the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix every moment now. It's like in a year, I'll maybe still be talking about both of those because they're happening as we speak, but it's just so funny because I'm very self-conscious about it when it's happening. And to me, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't shut up about this. Everyone's got to be like, please shut up. And then someone will reference something to me that I was on about a few years ago on the Patreon or on Soberish days. And I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot that I was ever into that or that I was ever talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I just try to remember that, I don't know, that it's interesting to me. So it's probably interesting to some other people. And, I feel like I talk about the book Robes like I go to a church where that's the Bible.
Yeah, I almost was going to get you for Christmas, like buy you a plethora of robes.
Okay, but isn't it weird that I also have quite a few robes?
You do, and that's why I didn't do it. I was like, well, she's already got this, like, you got that really comfy robe you wear in the morning, and then you've got a couple different, like, robe-y type things.
Yeah. Robe
adjacent.
I thought it was
funny. I wanted to get you, like, so you're in a robe all the time talking about robes.
I've also gotten you multiple robes.
Yeah, I'm a pretty picky robe guy.
I noticed because I was just thinking the other day, where's all Mark's robes? Not like a lot. I got you 2 robes in our time together.
Yeah, I like the idea of them, but then I oftentimes like they're too big and clunky and like cumbersome.
Yeah,
and so there's like a specific robe that I like. It's usually like thinner and like a little bit more form fitting.
Yeah,
where most robes you get they're like real big and comfy, and I like that sometimes, but not. I'm not like a get up in the morning and like put my robe on to go have coffee unless it's like a specific robe. That's
oh my God. Can we do a 2-hour episode talking about robes? The feeling. Anyway, I do feel like we've talked about it before, but I think it probably bears repeating, and I think you've spent more time with it. So I want to get into that. But first, I want to answer a comment because I believe in my ADH brain, we can combine these two things together. So last week we did the CE UFO episode. Also, today is Tuesday, December 17th when we're recording this. So the timeline's changing so fast. I feel like I have to clarify since these don't come out for like 5 days after. That if something crazy has happened in between that, we don't know about it yet. All right, so the question was several questions. Like I've gotten texts from people asking about the book. That's why we're talking about that today. Okay, I really like this. My initial instinct was to cheer for the CEO demise, but that's putting him in the bad category, right? This is just like wishing misfortune on Trump. They're both psychopaths with blood on their hands. I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I'm genuinely confused the distinction. All right. So I think this is so funny, but like another. So the point of not putting things into the yes or no box is about binaries, right? It's about seeing everyone and everything as either good or bad. It's not because we're then supposed to see everything as good. It's not the bad categorization. It's the oversimplicity to the bad categorization.
Right.
that is a tribal collective. It's a label that doesn't hold the full complexity of the human experience. So, that's one reason that I'm constantly talking about putting things in the bad or good or bad box. Because if you make a habit of putting everyone into a good or bad box, then, and especially like a lot of that is based on projections or like things you've gotten from media, you'll then put yourself constantly in the good or bad box. And the reality is that humans are complex and way more, I want like another word for complex. Nuanced than that. So, that's number one. Number two is most people stay in a disempowered state by letting, for the people for whom Trump is all of those things. A lot of people, that's not what Trump is to them. They see him as something else and a victim of the media. Letting Trump or Biden or any government, anything, or including CEOs, live in your head rent free as the excuse for why you're not in your power is a huge waste of time. And a lot of people, and it is dehumanizing, right? You're not seeing them as a complicated human or getting curious about why they do the things they do or whatever. So my 2 cents is that we are all programmed and conditioned to some degree by the cross of planning and the limitations of the cross of planning. Because the cross of planning could have been something beautiful, and it was in some ways for some people, I guess. But the human consciousness was not evolved far enough for the cross of planning to turn into something, for the people to come together and create some kind of healthy hierarchy to build the infrastructure. So we got what we got. But many people are still conditioned by that, including, I would say like most of what the right does. I said this in an episode we ended up getting rid of, but most of what the right is hung up on is protecting the cross of planning. Like they think the cross of planning, because they're still deeply conditioned. The left is deeply conditioned in a different way, but they think that we need to put the genie back in the bottle, that things are happening that are killing what it means to be a human, because they think what it means to be a human is capitalism, patriarchy, the traditional family values, whatever. It's just their conditioning, and they'll get over it the further we move into the cross of sleeping phoenix. Spending your life shadowboxing other people's conditioning is a huge waste of your personal energy. So a lot of times when I'm talking about, like when it comes to your fellow man, even if they identify as right or left, getting curious about why they look at the world, and extending empathy and compassion to them and understanding that their conditioning is why they're like insecure or whatever, would help you develop and grow as a person, because you're likely rejecting them because you're rejecting some part of yourself. But also people could come together and start to change things. What's the difference with the CEO? Well, I don't actually agree with sitting around talking about eating the rich. It's not. I have told this story multiple times, but like I was participating in that in 2020. My guides told me to pull my head out of my ass. I don't actually know these fucking people. And there's a big difference between sitting around blaming something outside of yourself for why the world isn't showing up how you want it to show up, and taking matters into your own hands. Now, I'm not condoning murder. I'm not capable of murder. So that's not an option for me. But cheering for the killing of the guy, I think, is people are missing the point. I don't care about that guy. I don't know anything about that guy. I also don't care about the guy who did it. It represents a kind of David and Goliath moment that I don't personally think needs to continue in the road of violence. I think we are further along in consciousness than that, but it represents a moment of unity for the people who have spent the vast majority of the time fighting, who aren't doing harm. That's the thing, is like there are people who are making, I believe they don't have, they either don't have souls or they don't have empathy or whatever, making decisions. Also, those people are deeply conditioned by what we're going to get into next. Making decisions for the vast majority of the masses and spinning them against each other and getting them to fight with each other. And you have people who actually have empathy and they want the best for whatever, thinking that the other side is evil and whatever. And most of those people have empathy, and their empathy is being twisted and used against them. And I just see it as like, imagine you're just in this giant stadium and everyone's on like the football field and they're all just punching each other out and fighting and everything else. And someone just fires a shot up into the sky and everyone stops for a second. And all of a sudden clarity comes across and people realize that like they're fighting each other for like made up shit. It really doesn't matter if your neighbor's a right winger. They're actually not having a massive impact on your life, actually. The people who are largely getting away with the things they're doing by keeping you fighting with your neighbor. So what this represented, I don't recommend giving a lot of energy to hating CEOs. I think those are like funny jokes on the internet or whatever, but it has changed the collective perspective away from fighting with your neighbor over stuff that doesn't matter. You guys should be able to agree to disagree. When you talk about agree to disagree, people go, yeah, but I can't because they're trying to take my rights. Okay, that's the issue. Why are your rights connected to a government? Like, why is there a government determining what you're allowed to do? Do you understand that that's not the point of the government? And when we start talking about getting rid of the government, everyone wants to talk about the roads and everything. Oh, we need the government to do this. Okay, but they're not doing any of that. They're telling you what to do with your body. Bring that into focus. Okay, you know who else is telling you what to do with your body? These fucked up industries. So Luigi or whoever the fuck took out a man who represents, it's also a ritual, by the way, who represents a thing who represents really the like parasitic entity that is using all these humans. The way that people are wrapped up in Trump is really you're wrapped up in a personality. Many of you are wrapped up in videos that you've only seen the first half of. And I'm not a Trump fan, but to me, I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. That dude's like obviously a narcissist. Doesn't seem like he got love from his parents. He thinks he's a hero. Who cares? I don't know. And the people, like, the whole time he was the president last time, like, people dedicated their entire life to obsessing over his tweets or whatever. I'm just like, is this a fucking, what about your actual life? Like, why aren't you living your life? Why aren't you doing something? It's very different to me than a CEO of a health insurance company, which is the most predatory health insurance company in the most predatory industry. So sure, whatever. I don't know. People have tried to pick Trump off. It didn't work, so it makes you wonder. But it's a David and Goliath moment in time. It's that shot in the air, and it caused a massive shift in human consciousness. So that's the difference for me. I tried to articulate that, but we recorded that episode twice, so I maybe didn't get into it the second time. It's not now sit around and dedicate all your time and energy to hating anyone. Because after people start to take their power back from these corporations, then the next step will be, and I said this last week, to realize that the corporations were always also you, and it was about your disempowerment. It's the same thing when you're in a relationship with a toxic person, and then the whole, like, when you finally leave, the healing is about, like, I tried to wait for you to change, quote unquote toxic person. I tried to wait for you to change, and then you eventually heal to the point where you realize you never set any boundaries. And so that person was really just operating within the structure that you gave them. Yeah. We will have a similar moment with these things. But for now, I'm speaking from the perspective of like where human consciousness currently is. So, like I said, I don't think it's going to take a bunch of assassinations. I don't know if we're just putting a B at the beginning else, but I think you're allowed to say all these words as long as they're not medical on this app. But that's the difference. Is like it's what the person, the Luigi or whoever it was, represents, and what the guy represented, and then what was immediately revealed in human consciousness afterwards. That is what's exciting. eat the rich as an idea where you're not fucking doing anything about it. And I don't think I think I shared something in my story where a guy who talked about an entire company of people coming together and quitting on the same day, and then pooling all of their money together to go start the same company, and then spending the rest of their time sending fake AI applications into the company they all quit from, so they're wasting their time. That is the kind of shit you can do when you're not worried about what the political beliefs of person in cubicle number 3 is, when you're not swept up in the drama. That is like, literally, we could take these corporations down. You don't even have to boycott them. I mean, boycotting is great, but as the employee, as the working class, walk out. What did Amazon employees?
Disengage, yeah.
Amazon employees in New York City, if I'm not mistaken, just walked out a week and a half before Christmas. That's how. But you have to come together. And that is where Aquarius will show you, that energy in Aquarius will show you that there is a way to have community together with each other without having to believe the same thing, without having to fit a mold. And this will be the hard way that y'all learn it. I'm saying y'all because I feel very connected to this energy that y'all, big y'all, whatever. I feel like a sanctimonious prick saying that way. But like, this is how humanity learns this, is by being pressured by a bully. And that's why on the other side of standing up to the bully, humanity will learn like, oh, the bully was here to help us learn to step into our own power, which is very cross sleeping fading. So that's the difference. I don't care if Brian Thompson, is that was his name? I don't give a fuck about that guy. I'm not giving that guy power. It's like, it's the solidarity. It's the collective, whatever. I wanted to segue. Did you don't have anything to say on that? Did you?
No. Okay.
Great. So I wanted to segue from that to something you were telling me about earlier about, I'm going to butcher it, so I don't want to say too much, but about loading parasitic, how service to self consciousness was loaded into us. And so we are all that by default, and that we have to heal to move into service to others. Because I feel like when I started seeing people as being in conditioning rather than bad. So when I see people who are still like bootlicking, I make fun of it. But like, people are still bootlicking for the system because they're conditioned into the system. People still believe the media because they're conditioned into the system. They're not necessarily bad people. And a lot of people who are like fighting for family values or whatever, like those people legit, many of them are propagandized. But they legit believe that like humanity is going to die if we don't, or many of them believe in a fucking dumbass God that's going to punish them, or you know what I mean? It's like many people's beliefs are not even their own. They're programmed into them.
Yeah. And
they would be a much better person if they healed. And many of them are slowly healing. And the thing that I hate about the good or the bad or the self-righteous fucking purity shit is like, I see I see people healing and evolving every fucking day, but everyone wants to be like, no, they're bad. I don't like their other takes, so fuck that. No one gives people space to like grow and heal when everyone's doing it to some degree. So what is the thing that you were telling me about?
The paragraph about the predator mind.
Yeah.
So this, one of the things that I've learned so much from this Wave Series book, but like in the beginning, the STS, STO kind of division, everyone falls into one of those energies. We've been hearing about that for a long time, since the raw material, the law of one. The thing in this Wave Series that was new information about that was that actually everyone in this dimension and this reality right now has been programmed to naturally be oriented towards serving yourself. So we're all programmed STS, and that's that conditioning that as you start to, awaken and kind of raise your awareness of the game, you realize, a lot of people have this desire to be service to others and want to, disintegrate their ego and get themselves out of this like me. And it's very difficult because what we would call kind of like our natural desires that come up in reality are actually oriented towards serving yourself, which is also just kind of enforcing this idea that we're all separate and it's every man for himself kind of thing. That's underneath a lot of decisions.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, because we definitely have talked about this part of it before, that doesn't mean you're doing what everyone else thinks you should be doing for them. But that means like service to self people are like other people aren't a consideration. Like the impact you're having on the earth isn't a consideration because it's all for you. The impact, like if you want to make more money for your shareholders so that you can be the most successful CEO, you don't even consider the fact that it's killing people because it's like everyone is an accessory to me, right? Yeah.
It's extremely nuanced, this service to self, service to others. It doesn't really, it sounds like it's simple and but it's so nuanced. And in general, like the core thing of STO is you are serving others to serve yourself because you realize we're all connected and there's this way, way back or way, way up. We are all like this one thing that has individuated and separated to explore itself. And so an STO being realizes that and then realizes the best way to evolve and ascend is to give your individuality out to others for this kind of mass understanding of who we are by understanding the other person and giving yourself to them, and that serves you. But one of the caveats is like you're only serving others when they ask of your service. So you're not encroaching on other people and telling them, oh, I see that you're limited in your thinking and like, so let me educate you and show you a better way to be. That is actually service to self because you're saying you're judging the other person as like whatever they're doing, wherever they are is not correct. And you know better, so let me tell you how to be better, is saying that you know more than them and that you know their life should be a different way.
Right.
When some people are here to be service to self. That's what they are dealing with karma. That's the path they want to take. It's free will. And so it becomes really nuanced. And I like that for me. It clarified some things where it's strictly on when someone asks for your service, you give all of it. You are very authentic and transparent and vulnerable, and you do that. But it's also, there's like, you have to be able to discern when someone's asking for your help, are they doing it in a service to self orientation? Like, I think the greatest example is like the way that we, like when we're younger, I mean, some people still pray like this, but you're having a difficulty in life. And let's say you're a Christian and you believe the Abrahamic kind of religious thing. And so you pray to Jesus for help, but you're going, Jesus, please give me $1 million. Like I hate this, and I give me the $1 million. You're praying to be saved and to be relieved of something you came here to, you chose to do, and that you want to learn how to get yourself out. That's not a more like harmonic, aligned kind of exchange of asking for service. You're doing it in a way that's basically saying like, get me out of here, save me, do the work for me. More likely than not, if a energy does respond to that and says, okay, yeah, here, I'll give you $1 million, get you out of it, that's also a service to self being, and you're not learning. You're not like, this isn't a service to others kind of exchange. And so,
yeah, I've had this experience where the thin line between rescuing or saving and helping. So in the past, I've tried to, I think, rescue people from their experiences where their soul is trying to learn a lesson.
Yeah.
Or I've tried to like financially rescue people from circumstances and you can like kind of quickly get into a thing where you're just paying their rent every month and they're not progressing, like they're not getting on their feet. You're
so
almost
much,
like it's like enabling, you know?
And so much, I would say, of the spiritual community, this new age, like the awakening thing, is riddled with somebody wakes up and then they feel like their only path to getting us all to a utopic kind of collective is everyone else needs to wake up. And so then you go out and you're trying to evangelize this spirituality and you're stepping over boundaries, and that's coming from what you would think is like a compassionate place. It's like, I see the truth. You're in delusion. I want to help you out of your delusion and see the truth so we can all be in utopia. But that in itself, it is a service to self act. And that's where the nuance is like, we've been programmed to be that way. So right when we wake up and we see some truth, we want to tell everybody else that they're wrong and get them out of that. But
because of our own projection of where they should be.
Yeah. And it's a judgment on somebody without knowing the history of this person, especially previous lives potentially, what kind of karma they're trying to deal with, and that they might be just one life away from actually being done with that karmic cycle, but they have to stay asleep further in this, and they have to kind of balance that out. And if you try to wake them up out of that early, they're not going to integrate that karma. And so you're judging based on like your own beliefs of the world and what you've experienced, and you're projecting that onto them and saying, that you know better, where you don't actually know. Like they actually might have a horrendous past that they have dealt with, and they're trying to balance that out. And they need to stay asleep for one more lifetime. And then they will be done. And then the next life, they will naturally progress into that. So you can see how and this is where the whole do-gooder thing comes into play, where like a lot of people that believe they're doing good are actually doing bad. Like they're doing this kind of service to self thing. And they're, they're kind of caught up in that they know better than others and they want to enforce that. And that can be a slippery slope into some kind of dictator kind of thing.
So you can be a well-meaning service to self, because infringing on someone else's free will includes trying to rescue them from their own mistakes.
Yeah, because at the macro point of this thing, there's no morality. Like God does not blink at the dark or the light. It's everything is open,
right?
And you have, if free will is true, which I very much believe it is, it does complicate some of these things that are based on what we see as moral values of good and bad. It's like some people, there are beings that like they want to choose to be tyrants and follow that path. And the source of it all, because it's all connected, says, yes, that is acceptable. Do that. And that's okay. There is no morality at the top.
I love this. Okay. So a lot of the issue that I have with like the way that people interact with, let's say Trump or a lot of the government or whatever, is this like addiction to, and it's different now, but like, let's say 2016 and 2020 is like, there were literally masses and masses and masses. It was a really annoying time to be a comedian, because I was just like, do you guys have anything else to think about? Is like every day, whatever that dude would tweet, they're like, oh my God. And the thing that's weird for me is I'm like, I only have to observe someone talking and operating for a short period of time before I get kind of like a snapshot of like, okay, this is that person's vibe. And obviously people can change, whatever, but that's that person's vibe. To continue to be shocked that they're showing up that way, which, I've had like a narcissist in my life, and I get that can be addicting with them. But you have to be like, this is who the person is. This is how they show up. Learn how to take your power back within it, especially if you're dealing with like a narcissist in your personal life, right? So somebody who's like a vampire. So a lot of the shadow boxing aspects of villainizing these psychopaths is that people are just almost like a culture of like complaining about it while still well, as if that's going to change it, like shadow boxing. Why is this thing like it is, rather than an acceptance that like there are vampires, there are parasites. Nothing we will do will stop them from being that, because that's what they are supposed to be. And then, you know, when you're ready for like college level consciousness, that's because it's you. But in this moment, it's like, yeah, I think we've been trapped in a as a culture in the United States, trapped in a like almost like begging the system to stop being corrupt, or begging the or pointing out that the psychopaths are psychopaths. Where what's turning now is like, what are you going to do to take your power back? That's the only conversation that needs to be had.
It's the only conversation. And the crazy shit is that like the temptation to point it out and complain and continue to go down the rabbit holes of the conspiracy and like validate it, and then still get off on kind of voicing your opinion and your distaste with it. That mechanism is like it's a mind control element. Like it's leaking energy. That's like what the loosh is like focusing on the thing and just bitching and complaining is you're leaking that energy out. And that's a being that has actually programmed us to be that way. So it can always feed on that energy. The only way to like stop that feeding is to take your power back and not be so bothered by the stuff that you already kind of know is there. And it like you said, it's like, if you know someone's showing up that way and they continue to do this stuff, why are you still banging your head against the wall and can't believe that that's happening? And whatever you're going to do with that, if you're just going to like loop on it and be disempowered and feel like a victim, if you're going to make a podcast about it and start like bitching about it and trying to tell, this is like you're disempowered. And it's crazy to me because it feels like, I know when I've had that feeling where it does kind of bring meaning and temporary relief to the victimhood and the pain, because you're seeing it and you want to talk about it. And it feels like you're being productive by talking about it, but you're actually, the energy is not going to anything that is actionably productive, like taking your power back and engaging in something else. Like those are things that are like, would slowly pull us out of the temptation to just keep pointing and complaining, which is, it's like a loose thing. It's really just taking the energy from you. It's a disempowerment, you know, but when you're doing it, it feels good in a weird way.
Is it people show you who they are, believe them, is like so personally empowering if we really absorb what that means. Because if someone shows me who they are and what they're capable of and I just believe them, then there's nothing to be outraged about. It's like, yeah, that's what that person does. So now what am I going to do to protect myself or to disengage or to not give my energy to that? Yeah. But we are so conditioned that like to shadow box that which is, you know?
And I think there is this like desire in a lot of the spiritual communities, like we realize that we're in this state that we're kind of being fed off of. We're in a like slavery kind of thing. The hope is like we need to stop all of this negativity to get to utopia. And that's I think the wrong way about going about it. It's like these dynamics are going to be here for a while as far as like good and bad. The utopia does not come from changing everybody and trying to put them in a good box. It comes from you changing yourself inside and being still in your energy when you see something negative happening. You know, you can not like it and you wouldn't agree to do it, but you don't give your energy away to it and become disempowered and feel victimized, you can have compassion or whatever. But
I mean, you can look at it and go like, okay, well, we're going to come together and come up. Like there's a difference between constantly lamenting about capitalism, predatory capitalism, as if it is like daddy ruining everything, and coming together with a group of people and just coming up with like hilarious ways to crush, like to cause a collapse. I mean, it's not that now you're all supposed to have positive vibes only. That's not, you're in a video game. Think like it's a video game.
Yeah.
It's what are you doing with it? Like when I talked last week about like when you're talking about the elites, quote unquote elites, is this an empowering conversation? Are you talking about them what they actually are, which is like bugs that are feeding off of you? or are you talking about them like overlords? Because the problem here is that you believe that they are your overlords. So going back to the CEO thing, the thing that has shifted is like it's just David and Goliath is the perfect description, is like someone who is part of a group that has believed itself to be powerless in the situation, did something about it. Not the ideal thing, but I mean, really, we live in an extremely violent country, and that person's part of a extremely violent industry. And that just kind of is the language of the land, unfortunately. I think that what happens from here, I'm holding out for it to become like very creative and funny, just because everyone is like a little trickstery from the internet. But yeah, it's so nuanced. It's like service to self, service to others sounds like it's two very easy boxes, but it really isn't.
It's
like
so
the degree
nuanced
to which we want to control other people.
Yeah.
Is really what I would say. If you needed to give it an easy yes or no, how much do you want to impose on other people?
Yep. No matter the circumstance. Like, even if they're doing something very bad, and then that's where it gets nuanced too. If somebody's like harming somebody and you can intervene and stop it, like that's good. Right. But like at a certain level, you can't intervene too much on what someone else wants to be. And it's wasting energy trying to change somebody that doesn't want to change, Right.
And I learned this, like, I'm sure I said this last time, but this painful lesson trying to rescue a sibling from a abusive relationship, where she just needed to learn that lesson. Or like I was talking to my 30-year-old daughter yesterday who just quit vaping again. And, she quit a couple years ago because I just sometimes like take over people's lives without realizing I'm imposing. And so I was like, I think she expressed that she wanted to quit vaping, but in hindsight, she could have just been saying that because she thought I was judging it or whatever. I think people think I'm more judgmental than I am. But anyway, so I was like, I'll take you on a vacation because it's much easier to quit when you're on vacation. So I took her to the beach. And then she felt all this pressure to quit vaping because I was like, I'll fix it for you.
On board, yeah.
And then she ended up doing it again in 6 months because it wasn't hers. Like, it wasn't her experience. It wasn't her time. And so that's just something in my life where I was always trying to rescue other people from suffering, and as if that's going to make them have like some sort of aha moment. And a lot of times it doesn't last for them because I've intruded in their own learning process with my savior complex.
Yeah, it's a real thing for everyone, I think. I think that's like part of the deconditioning is like we wake up and then we want to have the savior complex just kicks right in.
Yeah.
And again, so that's like going to kind of all come back to this paragraph, which gives a little bit more.
Okay, so this is the Wave series, which is a series of books by who?
Laura Knight Yazek is how you say it. It's spelled JADCZYK.
And Wave series, it's a shit ton of books.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to find again on like line. If you just look up the Wave or the Wave series, I think if you look up the Wave series, you get the first book of this series called Riding the Wave. But there's so many other books called The Wave or like The Fifth Wave, and some of those are spiritual books. But it's better if you just look up her name on Amazon, and then it's still not like super clear. So there's 8 books that are a part of what is called the Wave series, and they all have different names. So maybe we can put it in the notes or something, that every name, because it's 8 books, and I had to find the name and just look them up individually and get them all. But it's essentially something that was originally online. Actually, it was like a forum in the 90s that was just basically like the transcripts of Laura Knight, who was originally like a hypnotherapist. She was trained in hypnotherapy and stumbled upon this channeling. And she tells that story. But so she started channeling this social memory complex who calls themselves the Cassiopeans, and also said that they're a version of her in the future. And so she started studying it in a way that was like studying the phenomena in a very like questionable way. Like she was doubtful of what the information was and like the entire process. And she started like, you know, asking curious questions about her own personal life, but then started to get into more existential collective ideas. And, you know, was recording all of it and then was doing deep dives on the information that they gave to try to check if it was true or not. And the majority of it always checked out. And it was like very obscure, weird information that like nobody would know that these Cassiopeans had the information on. And so it developed over a couple of years, and then she started to get the push to make it public. And it was in the 90s, and so like the internet was new, and that was like the best way to get the information out. So she started a forum and just started putting all these transcripts up, and eventually made a book out of them. And so the Wave series goes back and forth from just straight transcripts of her asking this question to, you know, to the social memory complex and getting information back. And then she also, you know, does her own writing and explains backstory and like new foundings and connects the dots in a lot of the information that's channeled. Because sometimes the information, it's an STO collective, and so they are very much not going to just give you straight answers to things. They will not cross that boundary of free will where it becomes service to self. They're not going to save you. And so a lot of the answers are very ambiguous and abstract. And so it's helpful, like just the dialogues that she has within the books to like really expand on that. And so
where did you first hear of her? Like, where could people hear her on a podcast?
Yeah, so she doesn't have a lot of information, a lot of like podcast material, but I found her on the Higher Side Chats with Greg Carlwood, which is like one of the only podcasts I pretty much listen to every episode every week. And her interview on there, sorry, this cat is trying to kill me, is really good. The Greg Carlwood's like 2-hour tier, you have to pay $5 a month to get the 2-hour one. It's totally fucking worth it. If you just listen to the hour one, you're getting half the stuff. And so she's on that podcast. It was maybe a couple months ago. That's how I discovered her. But then if you go on YouTube and you just type her name in, there is another creator called Jay Campbell, I think, has a podcast. And he did like a 6-part series with her. And that's like the best stuff online. It kind of meanders in some ways. I don't really like that host, but it's good information. Other than that, it's like all the other content of her on YouTube is like from the 90s, like 2000s, like very
so
dated.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I've found most of the useful information just from reading the books, as well as if you go on to CassiopeanExperiment.org, I believe. The forums are all still there that have been there since the 90s, and it's deep. There's so much fucking information in there. You could probably get all of the book information on there, but it would be extremely scattered and out of order. So the books are like very much in order. And she also has a Substack that is actually updated pretty frequently, and she still is channeling the Cassiopeans. So there's like more current information from the Cassiopeans about, you know, the politics, about the current kind of global situation, which is really interesting as well. But the one that I left a comment on YouTube because somebody asked about the book I was referencing on the last podcast, which was a lot about psychopaths and psychopathy. That's the last book in the series that I'm on. That's called Almost Human. And it talks a lot about this, you know, psychopathy being one of the main factors and why the kind of whatever negative agenda has gotten so far and is being perpetuated because of the psychopath kind of genetics that are purposely being manipulated.
Right. So that there's so many humans not capable of empathy that this thing can kind of be pushed forward.
Can be really, really pushed forward.
I haven't really gotten into her the way that you've gotten into her, but I'll listen sometimes when you're listening. And she's a great example of, like, if you really want to get into all of the cool shit of understanding consciousness, you really have to be able to listen to people that don't believe the same things that you believe. Because when she personally shares her perspective, I disagree with a ton of it. I'm just like, oh yeah, very boomer, very cross-planning, politically. And
you got to remember, I mean, she's older now. She's like 70-something.
You have to understand, when you're talking about boomers, they were born and will die basically in the cross-planning. They're meant to embody that.
Yeah. And I will say, like, for all boomers, she is like really wide awake and like had a crazy take in the 90s. Like, she's really far along. But yeah, there are certain like opinions that she sometimes like will even put in the book. Like, she at one point, it's funny, but I'm sure she would laugh about this if I ever talked to her. It's just a funny take. She spends a couple pages bitching about kids these days and the clothes that they wear, and it's a psyop for them having tattoos and colored hair. They're crazy, and this is like, oh, you're just a boomer.
She's very kids these days. No one wants to work type shit that you could tell that just like we all do, but she works that into her like broader perspective, and just being able to see people for who they are and go like, okay, that's your perspective. Just like I'm sure people find my like anti-government stance, you know, you just kind of have to kind of push past that if you don't resonate with that and like whatever. But yeah, she's a great example of where I think that culture that was really prominent as a result of propaganda for the last 4 years of like, don't listen to anything that anyone you disagree with has to say, and, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater every single fucking time, that's a great example of, I've heard many things that were like really fun to chew on, really fun to bounce off with alien downloads that I've had. Like, obviously you're getting a lot out of it. It's been a lot for us to talk about and unpack. But if I was like, well, she believes, you know, and I haven't heard her like political stances, I'm sure I don't agree with them, but like, she believes this, so nothing she says, you know, it's like, that's fucking
it's crazy.
That's where the good and bad box is like literally
doesn't help.
It's so stupid. Yeah. And you can't progress. Like, you cannot progress in consciousness and look at the world that way, because you're going to miss 75% of the information.
That's part of the STS program is like, I think we're programmed to realize that there's bad, and then be like, I have to find the good only. And especially when you're looking for information, you vet whoever is giving the information. And if you find one thing that you think is distorted or wrong, then you go, oh, this isn't the person. I haven't found the perfect person.
Right. I haven't found the savior.
This is why everybody goes to Jesus and Christianity, because Jesus was, you know, recorded as this perfect person.
Right.
When it's also is like, it isn't perfect. When you look at really details in some of the stories in the Bible, it's like they were controversial things he was doing. And so this temptation, the desire to find a perfect resource that doesn't exist. Like, I really don't think it exists in the diversity of experiences from humans, and we're all doing our best to get out of the individual programming we have, and we're all at different levels. So some of those distortions or opinions are going to be seeded into the material, and you just have to recognize that it is for what it is. And, you know, there's still so much information to get from it. I think Jason Giorgiani's a good one too, because there's so much.
Oh, there's a lot I really fucking disagree with him on.
Yeah, he has so much really good information, and then a lot of his like current political takes are just like pretty extreme. And like, I tried him on for a minute and tried to understand where he was coming from, and I still was just like, I can't. I'm not on board with that. But the books that he has are great. I mean, they get into, and he's not biased in those books. He doesn't bring that shit in. I mean, some of them do. He's like, the Israel-Iran thing is like,
I know. I'm just not remembering we got in a fight in a hot tub about Giorgiani's take on Palestine.
Yeah, because I was at that point, I was trying it on, and I was like, I think there might be something here. I'm gonna like keep pushing, and then a week later, I was like, I can't. I don't get it. I tried, and so he has specific books about those things, but you know, the UFO. What's that one that I read? There's another one that Prometheus and Atlas I'm still reading, but Closer Encounters is a phenomenal book. It's just all about the alien phenomena, UFO phenomena, and then the time traveling stuff that we've talked about is all in there. And there's none of the politics and the controversial shit is in there. But yeah, that's somebody I think a lot of people don't like Giorgiani currently because of his takes on Twitter, and they're very much of the geopolitical situation right now. Would just throw everything out with him. But like, there's some valuable information that dude has. So
I'm going to let you read this paragraph.
Yeah, we'll finally get to the paragraph. So this is in the Almost Human book of the Wave series, and she references a lot in this Carlo Castaneda from his book called The Fire from Within, who, if you don't know who Carlos Castaneda is, he basically befriended, what is his name? Don Juan, who was a like shaman mystic dude from South America, who had some like profound knowledge that a lot of people have done studies on, but Carlos Castaneda was like with him down in Mexico, I think, for a long time, and really got a bunch of good information out of him. And so she's referencing this paragraph at this part of the book, and I just thought it's an interesting take, and it might be something we can bounce off of. Okay, so it says, we have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. You have arrived by your effort alone to what the shamans of ancient Mexico called the topic of topics. I have been beating around the bush all this time, insinuating to you that something is holding us prisoner. This is Don Juan talking to Carlos Castaneda,
okay,
by the way. Indeed, we are held prisoner. This was an energetic fact for the sorcerers of ancient Mexico. They took over because we are food for them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in chicken coops, the predators rear us in human coops. Therefore, their food is always available to them. I want to appeal to your analytical mind, Don Juan said. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradiction between the intelligence of man, the engineer, and the stupidity of his systems of beliefs, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of beliefs, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. They are the ones who set up our hopes and expectations and dreams of success or failure. They have given us conviction. How do you say that word?
Convenient.
Covet. Covetoussness.
Covetousness.
Covetousness.
It's wanting to have other people's shit.
Okay. They have given us covetousness, whatever the fucking word is.
They have given us ceviche.
They have given us ceviche, greed, and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist. A horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators give us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them.
Damn.
It's heavy. And so it kind of like, I think, misunderstood.
And then that's an excerpt from that book right there?
Yeah, that's from this book.
Which is called what? Just Carlos.
The Fire from Within by Carlos Castaneda. And
I feel like that's like a 101 book for awakening people, right?
It kind of is. Don Juan is like, he comes up in a lot of different circles. But it's one of those things, you're just getting it's not ancient. I think this was in like the 70s, and Don Juan seemed to be still embodying this like, pretty old shamanistic kind of experience and way of looking at the world.
I'm just navigating as someone born in the 70s, the ego fucking hit of you going, it's not ancient.
It's just like kind of ancient.
50.
It's dusty.
I feel
and
dusty.
wrinkly.
Okay, so in 10 minutes, I'm going to have to do a doctor's appointment. So this is obviously going to be, we're going to come back and keep recording.
So what I think is like some of the Don Juan stuff and like that, you know, that paragraph in particular could be understood from a way, if like from a victim mentality, is this, I think, where the theory comes that we're in a prison planet and that there is no fucking hope. And,
okay, but I take it as transcend their mind, transcend the cage.
Yeah, and that's what this, you know, the Wave series books are amazing because like what the Cassiopeians say and what Laura ends up saying as she's evolved over all these years is one of the biggest ways to get out of that control and the manipulation, the programming, is to become aware of what's going on, to have the knowledge, to see like the game being played, to understand the veil of like people doing things good, we're doing things for you, and to be able to see that this is like a game going on. This is like a deep, smart strategy of chess being played. And so starting to being able to like learn the mechanics and just have that knowledge is one of the biggest things to be able to not get programmed, because you can start to see it happening. And if you are aware, like you can choose to not do it. It's simple as that. Like you can just choose to not do those things. But it does take, and in the Wave series, I think it's there are times where it's like, fuck, this is a lot of dark information, and I don't know how to hang on to hope to get out of it. But that doesn't last very long if you just keep reading and keep expanding and not really applying too much morality to it. It is dark. There's certain elements of it, but I think some people do, like they don't know how to integrate that knowledge, and they come to the conclusion that this just is a hopeless pursuit of we're in a prison planet and there's no way out. They even got the reincarnation door fucking hijacked. So you follow the light and you come back in and you didn't want to, you know? And a lot of those things might be true, but there's so much more, I think, to this idea of them giving us their mind, that there's a liberating aspect of it. If you can realize that that's what's going on, there's a way to assess what you experience and the like immediate desire you have to feel like a victim, or all of these things. If you start to conceive, it's like, oh, they gave us that mind, so it would be harder for us to individualize and like empower ourselves and get out of it. So we will always, our instincts and our habits will be aligned for things that are better for them, you know?
Right.
And those instincts, I'm talking about the ones where we're like asleep and we're programmed. We're just operating off the subconscious. Our subconscious is programmed to benefit this like predator being, which I think is also important to think of. It's not like a fucking predator, like a singular being necessarily. It's big, it's huge. It's these like archonic macro energies that we oftentimes, to talk about it, you know, put a it or a he or she or a like the being.
Yeah.
But it's so much more complex than that. It's a essence, it's an urge, it's like a pole of energy essentially that expresses itself through, you know, most effectively through psychopathic genes or more hive-like mind beings that will just operate off of instinct and whatever they're programmed to do. So it's not like, it's not a disempowering kind of concept, though it sounds like it. If you think of it as like, okay, this fucking predator gave us the desire to be like it. It's like, how do you actually get out of that? So, yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, just to connect it, because I feel like we can dig so deep, but...
Well, and then I want to, once we get back from the doctor's thing, there's this other, in the Substack of the Cassiopeian stuff, there's a great back and forth that kind of centers around this too.
Okay. Yeah, so from the perspective of like, when we're talking about people who are still deeply conditioned, we're talking about like we are all programmed with this me, which I think gets incorrectly labeled as individuality or individualism. And the reason I don't agree with that is because true individualism is a reverence for the individual. And that is not about me.
It's reverence for all individuals.
It's unique, deeply
diverse
humanizing,
yeah.
Right? Where most of the systems that we are currently seeing, even if you see people doing things that seem selfish, they are dehumanizing, which is what a lot of there's positive aspects to collectivism and tribalism, but we are mostly seeing the negative aspects.
Well, I think that also, I was going to say this earlier, is that tribalism thing, it worked. There was a like Renaissance kind of part of it when we were coming from more agrarian kind of society. Like it created infrastructure to be able to advance in technology and all of these things. So there was a time when it was good, but just like all things, over time it changes, and we've evolved to a place where it's time to now move on to something else. And that's why I think that the right is obsessed with getting back, even if they don't realize it subconsciously, they're like trying to get back to that time where it felt like capitalism was the utopia. Is like after the Second World War, it's like we came back and everybody had the American dream, and like that's what they think is we're losing, and we need to go back to that. But so there was a time where like this kind of tribal world that was peaking and it was good, but they're resisting the change, and where we're evolving to is like now it's time to try a different background frequency based on individualism, based on creativity, all of that,
I was thinking about how people protect capitalism and feel threatened, because I'm probably like, I don't know that a label describes like my actual belief system, but I'm probably like a communist if you went according to like what actual communism probably is. I don't know. I don't read books on this shit, but
okay, I'm out of this relationship. If you're a communist, I'm done. This is where it ends.
The reality I'm talking about is no nation state, no government, no borders.
That's not communism.
No one even thinking that way. Okay, but hold on. If you ever watch people who identify as communists having conversations, they're always saying shit like, you don't actually know what communism is. Now if a government official says we're going to create equality, fuck no, I'm running far away from that. So I think what we've seen is like secret dictatorships that ran on a platform of communism is what I've seen. So I'm not talking about people taking things and making sure that everything's even Steven. Like the reality that I see is like would require humans to be to a certain point of consciousness.
Yeah, I think your beliefs it doesn't exist.
They don't exist.
There hasn't been an example.
Yeah,
I think that's for most people. It's that. I think a lot
if there's leaders, they are unpaid, uncompensated. They are nowhere higher on the hierarchy, and they're servants basically, and they're guides, and they're in that position strictly because they're fucking naturally good at that position, and that there is no clout or anything that comes with it. Like I am like a leaderless world. And my ideologies, obviously, human consciousness has not reached that point yet. So I'm aware of that. I'm able to straddle whatever. But anyway, I was thinking about people who like defend like capitalism because it worked for them. And then when you try to point out to them that, okay, but it didn't work for all these other people, right? And so it's like the people who are trying to get back to that. And it's like, okay, yeah, it was great. Unless you're a woman or black, it's great for like who it was great for, and then it was not great for a lot of people. They are of the belief that, well, I worked hard for it and I got it, so if you work hard for it, you get it. And that gets painted as individualism when in fact it's homogeny. Like that is homogenous beliefs, because that person is going, well, I who had this childhood and these resources and this level of intelligence, because we don't even talk about like, and this able body and this whatever was able to do it. Therefore, the masses who come from completely different experiences should all be able to do exactly what I did. And that is painting people. That's not individual thinking. Like an individual thinks, okay, well, I was able to do it, but I'm a projector and I've got it's a differentiated thinking. It's seeing each individual person as their own individual thing. And that's where you naturally move away from things like ableism without being shamed into becoming inclusive. It's just quite naturally, I look at you and I go, oh, okay, but you're swimming upstream of quite a bit of ADHD. So maybe this education system doesn't work for you. So we either need to break things up quite a bit, or how do we become more inclusive without it being this, I hate this gross, weird, feigned inclusion thing that's clunky.
Yeah.
Rather than, because it's based in fucking tribalism. It's like trying to make everything homogenized so it fits everybody, rather than seeing everyone as a fucking individual with individual needs. Anyway, so I was just thinking about how that thinking that gets painted as individualism is actually deeply not individualism. It's the sheer lack of respect for the individual, the lack of what's the word I'm looking for? Like awe, the lack of sacredness of the individual experience, the nuance and the complexity that has caused all of the inequality in this thing. Because what is equal for, like, what is one thing for me isn't the same thing for you because you're a completely different person.
Yeah.
I have to look at you as a fucking complex, your own human, rather than painting you with like, well, you're a man, so you like this. Like, every man TikTok that I see about people talking about their male partners, I'm like, that's me in the relationship. They're like, Mark's like walking by with a laundry basket and I left 50 fucking cups out. And then every TikTok I watch is like, men make you pick up their TikTok. It's like, no, we're all different. Actually, okay, I have to go to the doctor's appointment. I left for 20 minutes to do a Zoom call with my doctor, and I came back and Marcus almost finished the Carlos Castaneda book. All right, where were we?
Where were we? I think we had just been talking about that paragraph, maybe.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, also it's a game. That's why it's not hopeless. It's because it's a fucking video game. It's the point of the video game.
Yeah.
Is that you're born into a prison planet. It's an escape room. You have to figure out how to get out of it. And the point of the quote unquote bad guys or the parasites is so that you have a game to play. That's why getting too swept up in the unfairness of it, or the morality of it, or the shadow boxing of it is dumb, because ultimately it's a game about your own personal power.
Well, and that in itself is one of the pitfalls, is one of the tactics of the game, is to get you caught up on that victim mentality and to continue being disempowered by seeking and doing this whole thing and trying to, get the gotcha moment on they that will never really happen if you're always feeling victimized and disempowered. It's like it's like this illusion of thinking that's how we get out of it, when it actually is still disempowering.
Yeah, so I feel like the intersection of the cross of planning and the cross of sleeping phoenix is the cross of sleeping phoenix makes you start looking at the system differently, because for a long time people just accepted that the system, like women were conditioned that it was okay that they were disempowered in the system or whatever. It's and huge chunks of society are like bootlicking for the system until relatively recently in the last decade that has started to die off. And people now have been like kind of stuck in a place of begging the system to be fair. But it's like, oh, that's not what the system's about.
Yeah.
It's quite literally built as a pyramid to benefit the tippy top. So what Cross the Sleeping Phoenix does is go, why systems? What do we need systems for? The system's built the infrastructure, and we will now break off and use the infrastructure as a collective, I believe, at our highest timeline. It can get much worse and be much worse things, but I'm feeling more and more optimistic every day, seeing what consciousness is doing. So the question was the wrong question, right? Why won't the parasites be fair? Why won't the systems be fair? Why can't I have a seat at the table? It's like the table's gross. It's full of gross people eating gross things. It's a gross idea. How about getting rid of the idea of the table at all? Mm-hmm. And so this is where, like, you realize the whole thing's a riddle and you start to ask different questions, and then this whole other pocket of reality opens up.
Yeah.
Which is such a fun fucking game.
Yeah, the idea that, you know, when you kind of pull the pain and the struggle out, when you get to moments where you're having this, like, you're complacent with what you have and where you are, you see the beauty in everything, even the pain and struggle. The gamification of it, the riddling, the labyrinth, that like trying to crack the puzzle. I think it's, I mean, I particularly am like oriented that way. I love like a good challenge and a labyrinth kind of thing, but there's also a thing that I can tap into a part of myself, and maybe it is a like me in the future or a higher part of myself that like is laughing along with me when there's certain, you know, hurdles I get through and I crack a code for my own life, that it's like, oh yeah, that's what I came here to do. There's a part of me that like you can sense there's a certain point of like infinite possibilities and living in an infinite existence where you can do anything, that gets mundane a bit and gets a little boring. And I could see why we would choose to come into a very advanced labyrinth and forget and try to remember. And that whole process of like remembering and cracking the code and getting out of it is so satisfying. It's such a fun thing to do for a infinite being that is, you know, can do all things and explore. It's like to do this is like every so often I feel that part of me that's like, oh yeah, I wanted this for some reason, you know?
It really is fun.
Yeah.
Can I look at the notes?
Yeah, look at the notes, and then I can read some of this stuff from the Cassiopean Substack. It's pretty interesting because it's kind of bumps up against what we were just talking about, but then also like what we're experiencing right now with the UFO alien kind of phenomena. This thread is entitled Alien Agenda, A New Race. And so there's some really interesting transcripts in this that I think would be fun to kind of just go through and use as jump off points. But what do you got in your notes?
Well, I think that's it, because one of those you read to me last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's next, is the channel you read the other night, because there was a lot of like jumping off stuff there.
Yeah, and it's a really long thread, so I can kind of just like jump around and try to read some of the stuff that I read you last night, and then there are a couple other additional ones. It's hard because it's broken up. There's transcripts that are typically, it's just like labeled as like question and answer. It's like a back and forth, but then there's a bunch of other additions that she's referencing other books and other people's experiences with abductions. And
so this is like romance for me and you, is like on our best nights, you get in bed with some a yogurt parfait, or we get some popcorn, and then you read me some channeled alien shit, and then we just riff on it until we can't stay awake. Yeah,
until we can't stay awake. It turns you on, huh?
It was. I mean, I not necessarily that, but yeah, I'm definitely living in my favorite timeline.
Yeah, no, I love it too. Okay, so a lot of this is about, you know, there's so many different people have a lot of different perspectives on the possibility of like a hybridization agenda that's going on from the aliens. Is their race dying? Are they trying to get, you know, are they abducting people and taking genetics for their race to try to save their race. You know, could say they're advanced in a lot more ways, but are they also a dying race that is like maybe at a lower level, but they have more advanced technology, but they are dying, and so they are trying to take
lower level of consciousness?
Yes. So let's see, where would we start here? Okay, so this was a question. This is 1994. This is always so funny. It's crazy to me to think that there was
30 fucking years ago.
Yeah, that there were people talking about this and I'm like a 10-year-old just kind of do. It's weird to think.
I had just had my first child.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so the question is, Bob Lazar referred to the fact that aliens supposedly refer to humans as containers, according to one of the briefing documents he read at Area 51. What does this mean? All are containers for later use. 94% of all population will be consumed for ingredients. Total consumption, i.e. used for parts for a new race. I didn't say this was going to be happy. This is some dark shit in here.
Trigger warning.
The next question, how can humans be used for parts? Reprototype. Vats exist. Missing persons often go there, and especially missing children. Dark. What is the purpose of this project? New life here. And then
So this is saying this will happen, or this is saying this is the agenda?
This is the agenda, and it has been the agenda for a long time. As you'll see in a moment here.
Of the quote-unquote grays.
Of what?
Of the quote-unquote grays.
Yeah, it's the grays and the Lizzies, she calls them. I like that word better than fucking reptiles or reptilians. And again, I mean, some of this stuff is like, there are physical forms, but a lot of this is always like metaphor and energy descriptions. You know, I think in ancient times, people would refer to as seeing a dragon, what we would now, like a dragon in the sky, what we could now would maybe call that what are those neon lights in Alaska and Antarctica you see, or
Aurora Borealis,
or like a comet they would be calling a firebird, a thunderbird, you know. So there's that as well, but a lot of what this book goes into is actually like the physical incarnations of other beings that are hyperdimensional, are very, like, they have a different form, and they are what we would closely reference as like an upright alligator. It's like reptilian, but they're kind of humanoid, but they're like hyperdimensional. So they also can shapeshift and stuff. So it's like, it's a more advanced biological environment, I would say.
The Upright Alligators Brigade.
Yeah.
That's an improv joke.
It bombed. Okay, so, and then they reference, this is just an interesting side thing from Carla Turner, published a book called Taken. In it, the abductee, Pat, recalled a tall white scraping skin from her inner forearm and the bottoms of her feet with a file-type instrument, as well as clipping her hair and peeling samples from her fingernails. This was during an abduction. She said, "What do you need all these pieces of me for?" she asked. And the entity said, "We are making a new you." Okay, so then the next transcript, July 22nd, 1994. Why do we need to know these things? A very big effort on behalf of the Orions and their human brethren to create a new race and control. Do the Orions want human bodies as hosts? Some do. What are they using our energy and bodies for? To create a new race. Theirs is fading out. And then she says, "We were here first." And they say, "So we're insects. Greys now want your planet." What kind of people is this being done to? Low-level humans. What happens to the high-level humans? Some will survive.
Do we have any idea how they're making that distinction?
High-level and low-level?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably referring to, a lot of this book talks about OPs, open portals.
Okay, so like conscious humans and unconscious humans?
Essentially.
Okay.
There are a lot of beings that are on the planet that, like, I think she says something, it's like 50%. We've maybe talked about it before, she was always calling them OPs, open portals. We would now, a lot of people are using the term NPCs. And they're essentially they are like kind of open vessels that they wouldn't have like an individuated soul, but you wouldn't be able to recognize that, and you could, unless you really had the discernment. And those beings I like the term open portals because it really more points to they're like a moving object that any kind of consciousness can jump into and like temporarily possess to get something to happen, So like you might not even, a person could be an open portal and be just going about their normal life until maybe you as a like higher conscious being with an individuated soul interacts with them, then temporarily some other energy jumps in to affect you in a certain way.
Right.
And you wouldn't even notice it,
An NPC, I don't know, it's like dehumanizing.
It's very dehumanizing. And the OP thing too is also essentially saying like we are all kind of in the category of an open portal until you individuate and essentially deprogram your subconscious.
Yeah.
You're capable of
You have a hole in your aura
over.
and can be puppeted by whatever.
Yeah. So the path to try to get to like a fourth density would be to individuate, get a hold of your subconscious so you cannot be puppeted without knowing and retain your power, essentially. Also, just to be clear too, I may have mentioned this before, this book goes into really deeply the different races and what is going on there. And essentially like the Orions are kind of this like overarching, the majority of the Orions are this service to self, kind of tyrannical, kind of hive-minded beings. But there are many different races, you'd say, within the Orion kind of faction. So there are these lizards, the Lizzies, the Greys. There are some Nordics, like tall whites, that are there too, but then there are some Nordics that are actually more STO. But what I found really interesting, that I've seen this in a couple other channel information or people that have talked about the Greys, and essentially what it is saying that the Greys are a biological kind of drone, like machine-like being that is subservient to the lizards. And so the Greys are like a hive-minded entity that like doesn't have the ability to feel emotion, and it is just directed by like an overarching kind of queen bee entity that like originally programmed it for it to just do its work. And essentially they're like little drones that can go around and do the grunt work. So they are not fully organic life forms. They are like somewhat machine type, but way more advanced machines. It's like it's half biological. So there is like DNA and shit, and there's genetics, and it doesn't have the ability to like feel compassion. It's extremely advanced. Obviously, it has like telepathy, can read your mind, can shapeshift, do all these things, but it is not like an organic thing. And so I just think that's interesting because it's like they're the little servants of the lizards for the most part.
Mm. And that's the ones that are trying to extend their race? Or both? It
seems like both are.
Okay.
And it gets into this in a minute of why they're doing that. Okay, so it says, you say there's an effort on the part of these beings to create a new race. Why do they want or need a new race? Theirs no longer satisfies them. And then...
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Nah, I think I would like a new race.
Okay.
I think I'd like to be a new species.
So this is the Cassiopeians speaking again. It says... And those who are described as the lizards have chosen to firmly lock themselves into service to self. And since they are at the highest level of density where this is possible, They must continually draw large amounts of negative energy from those at the third level, second level, and so on, which is why they do what they do. This also explains why their race is dying, because they have not been able to learn for themselves how to remove themselves from this particular form of expression to that of service to others. And since they have such a long period of time remained at this level, and in fact become firmly entrenched in it and increase themselves in it, this is why they are dying and desperately trying to take as much energy from you as possible, and also to recreate their race metabolically. Well, if we are sources of food and labor for them, why don't they just breed us in pens on their own planet? They do. Well, since there are so many of us here, why don't they just move in and take over? That is their intention. That has been their intention for quite some time. They have been traveling back and forth through time as you know it to set things up so that they can absorb a maximum amount of negative energy with the transference from third level to fourth level that this planet is going to experience, in the hopes that they can overtake you on the fourth level and thereby accomplish several things. 1, retaining their race as a viable species. 2, increasing their numbers. 3, increasing their power. And 4, expanding their race throughout the realm of fourth density. To do all of this, they have been interfering with events for what you would measure on your calendar as approximately 74,000 years. And they have been doing so in completely still state of space-time, traveling backwards and forward at will during this work. Interestingly enough, though, all of this will fail. So, I was going to mention something back here. Oh, just the idea that I think I've mentioned this before, but from this information from this book, the Cassiopeans say that to be service to self, you can only be that way through up to fourth density. And the reason is that, so like first, second, and third density, we can kind of all understand that. First density is the mineral kingdom. Second density is plants and animals, somewhat sentient. And there's like a crossover from second to third. Like there are animals that become very conscious and almost like self-aware. And then third density is the self-aware human consciousness, but in a material, physical body. And then fourth density is similar to the crossover from animals becoming kind of sentient and kind of self-aware. Third density goes into a like half physical reality and half ethereal. So it's like half spirit form. And after that, then it's fifth density, which they say, I love this description. It's like the spa of consciousness. So it's where you go when you die. And essentially, like everyone has a cord that is connected to the fifth density. And so when you die, that cord pulls you up into the fifth density. You do the life review and all that stuff that we've heard about. And it's a protected area that none of the other beings that are in any kind of hyperdimensional reality can actually get into that area to manipulate and control and kind of, perpetuate their agenda. It's a protected space that beings go to. You die, and it's kind of like you can rest and recuperate. And then when you're ready, you start to set up your next incarnation. And that's a whole other, rabbit hole to get down. It's like the Bardo state where you then decide, and you're you remember everything, and you kind of know, okay, well, I didn't get what I wanted to do last time, so I'm going to go back and try, and you decide when and where, all that kind of stuff. And then beyond that is the sixth and seventh density, and sixth density is where it's a social memory complex existence. It's all ethereal. There's not a physical body that you take on, but it's a collective kind of consciousness. And, in each one of these levels, there's like a multitude of experiences to have that are specific to each level. So sixth density, by being plugged into each other's experiences and consciousness, you can all experience something that you wouldn't be able to experience on the third or fourth density because it's a limited thing. And so to get to that space you have to be able to understand that we are all one in some form, and we are just separated, and we connect to each other in that way. You can't be STS driven. You have to realize that we're all part of one thing, and what can we experience when we're all remembering that and plugged in. And so this is where a lot of the beings like Jesus or Hermes, people that were like we know in history that had this kind of really macro awareness, but were embodied. It's like they were being fed information from the sixth density, and a part of them existed in the sixth density, and downgraded, I would say, like put themselves down into a body to have experience and communicate some of that information. So then seventh density would be back to the source consciousness and all that can be experienced from that perspective. And so fourth density beings, when you get to that's what this was describing, is that they've essentially maxed out, and they rely on manipulating third density for energy.
Because they can't progress.
They can't progress because they have not individuated. You cannot get into a sixth density collective thing when you're oriented that way. And what then happens to those beings is that's their peak, and eventually, like this is saying, they're trying to save their species, but they don't realize they're caught in a materialistic loop, and they have advanced technology, so they're time traveling back and forth trying to figure out how to save themselves, but it's like they physically cannot. They're so entrenched in it. And what eventually happens is that those species do die, and that energy from those beings gets recycled back into the kind of soup of energy and consciousness. And so it's like a black hole, and it essentially goes to the bottom. So on the first density, like before the first density, is a black hole, and at the top, the seventh density, it's a black hole. And so it's like this loop. It's
like a torus field?
Yeah. And so to get to the top, though, to have an individuated memory and experience, it's that STO thing to get into sixth and seventh. And at that point, then there is a kind of a like, well, let's go do it again. Let's forget, and you kind of start over. But you are individuated all the way up through, and you can remember the lives and experiences you've had. If you just do the fourth density thing and you go back to the source and go back into the soup, you don't have a memory of it. It just goes back in, it scatters, life comes back together in a new form, and there is no individuated memory of the experience. And so, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I found that whole description of these densities very interesting, and it resonates a lot with how it feels to me. Okay, there's this next couple things that I thought were interesting. Okay. What do these guys, this is about kind of Antarctica, it starts, and then it goes somewhere else. This is 1996. What do these guys plan on doing in the underground facilities in Antarctica? This is where the master race is being developed. David Jacobs says that producing offspring is the primary objective behind the abduction phenomena. Is this, in fact, the case? Part of it, but not the whole thing. Is there another dominant reason? Replacement. Replacement of what? You. How do you mean? Creating a race to replace human beings, or abducting specific humans to replace them with a clone or whatever? Mainly the former. You see, if one desires to create a new race, what better way than to mass hybridize than mass reincarnate, especially when the host species is so forever ignorant, controlled, and anthropocentric? What a lovely environment for total destruction and conquest and replacement. You see?
Okay, pause. What's anthropocentric?
Yeah, I see that word all the time.
Centered around No, does it just mean materialist?
It's one of these words where I know the meaning when it's used, but I couldn't give you the definition. Let me just look it up.
They only shop at Anthropology.
Yeah, I think it's that. They love. Okay, anthropocentric, regarding humans as the central element of the universe.
Oh, perfect.
Interpreting reality exclusively in terms of human values and experience.
It does really make you very exploitable when you think you're like some superior top of the food chain.
100%, man. Okay.
Okay, that was my first pause. And then if you read too much without talking about it, I forget half the shit you said.
Yeah.
The other thing... Okay, so essentially these goons think that because they're trapped in material reality, which is like, so they still think the physical reality is kind of the top. So their consciousness is not able to pass through the normal channels that everyone else's consciousness is able to, because they're hyper identified with their bodies, because they chose service to self, which limits you from realizing you are a part of all that is.
Yeah.
And so they are, because there's a lot, and I think you get to this in a second, but there's a lot in this kind of alien lore that you hear about. This always used to fuck me up when I would hear people talking about like, well, the aliens from Mars, you know, destroyed their bodies. So now they are they need to replace their bodies, or they need to replace their planet. And I was like, why don't they just release that story of that race? Like it's so contradictory to the aliens that I talk to and the way that they talk, which is just like literally you're having a human experience right now. You were from Sirius star system before. Like they're just games. And I'm like, why are people... I just would project aliens awake because of the aliens I was talking to, but I'm talking to like interdimensional beings.
Well, and I think you're talking to like your alien. It is a sixth density thing.
Yeah. And so now I realize that like there are other races. I was being anthropocentric. There are other races that are trapped in a 3D thing, and they're trying to physically save their physical bodies because they think they are their physical bodies.
Yeah. 3D or fourth density.
Right.
And this is what like we've talked about before, where I think we have this illusion from this point of perspective that anything higher has like spiritually developed and individuated towards service to others.
Almost moralized it. It's finally coming into perspective for me, I think, because all this stuff is changing at the same time. And so as I'm trying to get like, okay, this must be this and this is this. So what is happening, I think, is what I'm gathering, is that the planet is like human consciousness is elevating. And there is a path of human consciousness elevating that includes like becoming self-aware, really understanding the wiring under the board, and being able to create kind of a beautiful life, whatever. And then also Earth seems to be passing through some place, is some energy that is raising or is changing the density of the planet. And when I think of density, I think of time, how time feels, how fast things manifest. It like the density seems to change the algorithm and the way the algorithm works. And even the most dead asleep person I know, like person operating out of all of their programming and ego and service to self and whatever, has noticed that reality is feeling dreamlike and weird, and that time has gotten weird. And I'm like, oh, we're entering into a different frequency of a video game that will be fourth density. But the experience that I'm having, and most of the people I know are having, of like our human consciousness elevating and us becoming self-aware and stuff, is not the reason that we are experiencing the time dilation and the dreaminess and the fucking like everything feels like surreal and fucking bizarro land. That's happening to everybody. That's
it's almost an effect of the earth going through the change.
Right. So it's like the earth is going to fourth density. Everyone's going there. Whether or not you're having this other experience, like service to others awakening or not, like those two things are not necessarily connected.
Right.
Okay.
Because, and this is why there's so many channelers, like putting an emphasis on there's a split happening and there's a decision needing to be made right now because it's moving into fourth density and you get locked into whatever direction you're taking as far as like STS or STO. And but it's a split because we're in that transitional phase. And so you can decide which one you want to be. And that's something that I think if you're asleep and you're just run by your subconscious, you're essentially choosing service to self. And that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you can only see so much in the awareness and your subconscious is driving you. And so you are trying to stay alive for yourself. You're oriented towards like me. It's just me. I'm trying to survive. And that would line you up with an STS, but you would still be like, you're essentially just being programmed by and run by fear and the inability to individuate.
That makes so much sense. So, because remember I got that download in 2023, I think that 2024 was kind of last call and that people were making a decision in 2024. And if you didn't start your awakening process in 2024, you weren't going
It's going to be too hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's like,
and so, but then I feel like there's mass awakening is going to happen. Well, I thought this year, and it is, right? Because class consciousness is the beginning of awakening for a lot of people. Like everyone doesn't wake up to aliens. Like people can wake up to like ways that I've been wrong, ways that I've been harmful, like, ways that people I thought were bad are actually just like me. Like those are all awakenings. And then I think we'll see a lot of the awakenings that happen in 2024 really kind of explode in 2025. And a lot of, every time someone wakes up and starts to do the work, we create a new matrix. We create a new grid for new baby aliens, new baby awakened people to get on. And that's why it's like what took me 20 years to do, people can now do in like 6 months.
right.
So anyway, which takes me back to someone said, what if I've been awake since 2001 and now I'm embittered that it took everyone else so long to wake up? I don't want to get too distracted. Remind me, we're coming back to fourth density. I woke up in 2000 and for a long time I asked, like, why am I, especially once everyone else started to wake up in 2017, I'm like, why was I awake 17 years before everyone else? Number one, because I'm a little bit of a hipster and I like, not like hipster, but I like to discover things or think I discovered things. It was fucking fun to be awake when everyone else was asleep. It's kind of fun to be like magic in a dream and nobody else knows. It's like lucid dreaming. Number three, I would have been really dangerous if I didn't have a couple decades to mature in my awakening. I had a lot of my own extreme beliefs and trauma and stuff to heal before I started talking into microphones. So for me personally, that's part of it. And, sometimes I used to think I was like superior. I didn't like directly think I was superior, but you go through a phase where you feel like alienated because you're awake and you feel judged or whatever. And it's all just coming from inside of you. But I realized that the people who wake up last minute are actually really fucking smart. And I am the equivalent of someone who like hangs out in the exit lane way too long and gets mad at the people who are zippering when, if I would have zippered, people like sliding into consciousness in 2024, smart.
It's kind of a badass move.
You set your alarm for the last minute and that's pretty smart and you can't hate on that too much. So yeah,
I think primarily, like, and a lot of that, like, kind of pertaining to that comment, there is this. We all deal with it, and I think it's a part of deprogramming the STS thing. That is a deep one. Is I'm unique and special,
right?
And that's true on a lot of levels. From this individual kind of thing we're moving into, like what you specifically bring to the table that is based on your unique experience. Nobody else has that. And so it makes it all are important equally for like being diverse and showing a different way to do something. And that like that is unique and special, but all are that. But what I think happens, especially if someone wakes up early and then, you know, is in this kind of pain for so long, not feeling seen, not feeling heard, and then eventually everybody else starts to wake up, immediately feeling bitter and like angry is it's you're thinking it feels like we're thinking in a place that it's like, I'm special, I got here first, and I was never recognized, and now everyone's jumping in and getting recognized, and there's this whole new thing, and you immediately feel bitter because we're kind of caught up in that program of like, I'm special and I'm an important person, which is just, it is true, but not from this STS tribalistic kind of limited thinking, you know?
Yeah. And I think the way this person was saying it, it's like, I've been watching everybody fall for what the media says and fight and whatever. And I resonate with that a lot.
I do too. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I recognize it in myself. Like in the beginning when I had like multiple mystical experiences and like had this beginning of my awakening, I was caught up in like trying to get everybody else to see that and feel seen for that, and then gave up on it and eventually started to evolve and realize that was like a false thing. But then when everybody else started jumping on and being like, whoa, did you know that like the pyramids weren't built how they said? And then they were getting attention. I was like, you motherfucker, I knew that forever. Now,
yeah,
like I want that attention, you know? It's like this, I've felt that and I know what it is, you know?
I love that. You're very much talking about this from the perspective of a projector. I think that we like more people can wake up, like a certain amount of people have to wake up. A certain amount of people have to be awake just to keep the earth from completely descending into something we can never come out of. So this is where you have like monks on like just living no life other than holding the vibration. And then if you want to raise the vibration, it has to come in waves, and those waves have to hold space for the next wave. And if you've been awake for decades, you volunteered to be on what wasn't even the first wave. I think the first wave is in the late 50s or the 60s.
Yeah, this go around.
But there was a huge wave of us that happened in the early 2000s. I woke up in 2000. Noah Lampert woke up in 2000. There's a lot of us that woke up in 2000, Gen Xers. And then you have to hold that or like be expanding your consciousness because it was so dense to get the vibration up enough so that people could come in. And now there's so many awake. I feel like I'm the only one that understands how many awake people there are. There's so many fucking awake people that now people are just bouncing open, but awake. I did a session with someone, and now this isn't even weird, but I remember being like, holy shit, and running down to the studio and telling you about this. I did a session for someone in 2021 or 2022 who literally was driving down the street and suddenly was awake. And then was like, oh my God, and remembered what they were and what consciousness is. No psychedelics, no near-death experience. 20 years ago, you had to work you had to have some sort of crazy experience to wake up. Yeah, like I had a near-death experience. And now it's you be driving down the road. And this was like a NASCAR bro. You know, this was like a guy who like has a fantasy football team and was into like sports or whatever. I can't remember if he had that, but he was like, no, you have to understand, I am not from this world.
Yeah.
This was so crazy. And between 2017 and now, it's been like doctors, lawyers, people who work for the government. Like I've done sessions with people who have like clearance for the guy, you know, it's high level clearance. Like it's now endemic. I don't remember. It's everywhere. And that's because the vibration is so high from so many people being awake. But it took people being of service 20 years ago to be like, I'll wake up and just sit here, you know. But I went through you feel so alone And you feel so frustrated because everybody's like falling for shit right and left that you can see. And that can be very isolating, depending on how quickly you learn the lesson to stop talking about it. You know, fortunately, I got all of my, like, I called it the sky is falling phase. Like, I stopped trying to point it out to people and just learned to live in my own reality and let people live in their own. But I had lots of experiences over the decades of, like, thinking I found someone who's kind of awake and then saying too much, and then they get weird, you know, they're into it in that moment, but then they get kind of sketched on me when I'm not around. Like, I realized that, oh, you can just kind of, like, I would have said red pill back then, but now this means something else. But you could like accidentally wake people up and then they'll turn on you. I had all these experiences over the years. And then in 2017, it was like my awakening fucking kicked into overdrive, where I'd been in kind of just like I was hacking abundance and shit, but I was kind of the same level awake from 2012 to 2017. And then all of a sudden I have this twin flame thing. My fucking life falls apart to like start building something else. Everything is very supernatural. I get, this is not happening. Everything is very dreamlike. And then 2018, 2019, I'm doing psychedelics again for the first time in a really long time. And I remember getting this huge download, which I should find because I feel like a lot of this is happening. But I sat up doing psychedelics on my birthday with Aaron, and he ended up in a different room than me the whole time. And I was writing out this channel from the aliens. And at one point, they were telling me everything that was coming. And then they were like, you're still going to know things before other people know them because we know you like that. And I kind of realized in that moment that I was feeling a little bit of grief and possessiveness once the mass awakening started.
Yeah.
And I do still feel that sometimes when I'm flipping through TikTok and things that would make people think I was nuts when I said them 5 years ago is so common on TikTok that I feel like a hack discussing it now. Video game reality, aliens as we are aliens, like that shit was literally 5 years ago crazy when I said it. Like, I had to go through a process of forcing myself to talk publicly about it in 2019, and now it is a hack premise on TikTok. I don't think people realize how much has changed. There's a part of my ego that feels a loss. You know, it's not the entirety of my experience of it, but like there is a part of my ego that's like, oh, this was something that made me different, or this was something that was just mine for so long and now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I am simultaneously really excited for that. And also there's a little bit of grief that it's not just mine anymore.
Yeah, and there's a part of us, I think, that wants the recognition for it. Like you had to do the hard work, you had to sit in that, and then there's that part of us that I think is like this STS programming. It's somewhat natural to feel it and it's okay, but that it's like you want it. It's almost like you want the recognition before everybody starts talking about it. Normally, it's like every post needs to be like, "This was from Jessa Reed," and like this is the thing. You know, you don't physically want that, but that's the idea. It's like I thought I had discovered something new, and now it's like everybody knows it, and there's no recognition that like I helped bring it forward, you know?
Yeah, kind of. I feel like that's the projector part.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, it's like I feel that, and I've seen other people. It's in us to just want the, like, maybe it is stronger in me as a projector because I'm riddled with like needing to be seen.
Yeah,
on a core level.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I like to be seen. I'm sure there is part of I mean, there is like, I was making content talking about this stuff, and then I went offline, and then when I came back to the space, it was like this alien school thing I was doing is now 50 million people are doing it. I don't think they ever saw me do it. It just is. But it was that being an alien in a human body was just a little private perspective that I just had and shared with very few people, like unless you knew me well. And now it is a common perspective of,
and it's almost
reality.
made fun of in a lot of ways sometimes too, because it's like the hacky part of it.
Yeah, because it's just like so many people are doing it now.
Yeah.
And so it's not like give me credit for it because now it's so hacky that I'm like, well, don't associate that with me. But it is like my dream. If you would have told me 22-year-old me when I woke up, like, this is the reality you'll live in your 40s, I would have been so stoked. Or they would have been like, if it would immediately have happened and everyone would realize they were an alien, like there was a point where I was like, guys, we're aliens and that we can actually be superheroes and blah, blah, blah. And it's now as a concepts all over the place. It is funny where it's like I adapted to the fact that everyone didn't wake up. And so then I became the character in the reality I was living in was like, I'm an alien in a movie full of humans that don't know they're also aliens. And so this is how I navigate through the world. And then like something just happened in the last 5 years where so many other people woke up and now it's everywhere. And it is simultaneously like my dream come true and also like, oh, okay, well, I just have to adapt again, you know?
I just remember experiencing it like in the circles that I was in as I was starting to wake up and had a little bit of a savior complex, trying to talk about some of these more radical, weird ideas with people and getting eye rolls or getting looked at like I'm crazy. And then, you know, a year or two later, I see some of those people going on about that on social media and posting like, did you know this and this is real? And like, I got, you know, mocked for it. And that's the feeling that I get when I see other people. I'm like, oh, you fucking bitches you weren't listening to me. Like you were caught up on your own thing. And now you're owning it and you're getting like recognition for it.
Yeah. The recognition is the
projector
the projector.
And just to be clear, the recognition, I want to be seen. It's not the vanity thing. It's not the ego thing, which it took me a while to actually accept this in myself. And I do think it's a core part of being a human as far as when you go back to the macro like source, it separated from itself and divided itself down to try to understand itself and have experiences. And so it's trying to see itself through other people to know what it is all the way back. And so that's a core desire and it's okay. I threw that out when I like had the success and attention that was based in like ego and vanity and climbing a ladder and like looking like I'm better than other people that I didn't enjoy. And when I, you know, exited from all of that and then wanted to start to be an artist again and create, I kind of was under the illusion. I was like, I don't want to be seen for this. So I'm going to make the art that doesn't have my face. I'm going to create a false name. It's not going to be tied to Mark. It's just going to be my art. And started pursuing it that way. And then was realizing, I was like, well, wait a second. I think there actually is a part of me that wants to be associated with my art because it's me and I want it to be my individuality expressed in physical form. And I had to like work on myself to go like, that's okay. Like you can desire to be seen. And it's not based in vanity and ego. It's a core mechanism of trying to understand each other, you know?
Yeah, every projector I know, running this through a filter real quick, all the projectors I'm close to, like have a really complicated relationship with, like projectors have to be recognized. That's how you know you're connected to the right people.
It's also how you actually understand yourself. It's very weird. But
yeah.
Like, projector has to get a mirror from someone else to see themselves.
But then projectors, every projector I know also has this weird humility thing.
Every single one that I do a session with like hates self-advertising, trying to promote their own thing. They feel very uncomfortable with it. But we have deep conversations about how they're unsatisfied that nobody sees them. And they're like, but I don't want to advertise. I don't want to put myself out there. It's like, well, pick one. You know, and that's what I always work through with them is like I had the same feeling. It's like you don't want to do it because you don't want to be seen as someone that's like trying to get attention. And so it's trying to separate the two. There's an ego vanity thing that you play the capitalistic game, you play the like social media thing. It's like, check me out, look at me. That is icky and gross. But then there's this other part where like you're deeply trying to find your individuality, yourself, who you are, and you need to broadcast that to be seen for that.
So I think so external validation and recognition are being conflated, right? Like
yeah.
someone
That's
who's
a
seeking
good way to put it.
validation outside of themselves so they can run from their own insecurity is being conflated with, I need to be recognized for what I'm bringing to the table. So that wound for you of talking about consciousness and being ignored or poo-pooed or whatever, because, by the way, you were around the wrong people. Now those people have had their own awakening and then are starting to, or whatever, or hijacking that. And then they're talking about that stuff. And it's like, really that wound is like they were the wrong people. That's why you didn't feel recognized.
Yeah.
And so now they're going through their own awakening. I will say something I've noticed lately. I keep meaning to bring up to you. Maybe the podcast isn't the place. I am also learning about having a 12th house, Saturn in the 12th house in Leo. So I have a really complicated relationship with my own arrogance where I feel it like pop out under the mask every once in a while. And I'm like, I'm so like ashamed of it. And then I think that's why I have a weird relationship with fame as well. But there are certain things about myself that are like my favorite things about myself. And one of my favorite things about myself is that I come up with really good outside of the box ideas. And I solve problems really unconventionally. And it's like my favorite thing about myself. But when I do that, it's almost like immediately after I am the one who came up with the unconventional idea that solves someone else's problem, they immediately forget that it was my idea. No one ever goes, and then Jessa suggested that I do this. So it's really in my personal life, like a lot of times, like with you or friends or whatever, it's like I will have come up with some just actually harebrained idea or just like so not what anyone else would think. And it's immediately, I don't know if it is immediately forgotten or like what it is that I want. But then when I hear people retell the story of how the problem got solved, it's like, I'm not in it. And I'm always like, why does nobody remember that? It's like my favorite thing. And then it's like, well, why do I want people to suck my dick over that? And it's like, well, I don't think I want them to suck my dick, but it's like, am I so good at solving problems unconventionally that I am seamless about it? And so then, or do I just not seem like why do I feel like I need recognition for that?
Yeah.
And that's something I've been thinking about lately, because it'll be something even like super minor, like we're doing something around the house and I'll come up with some ridiculous thing. And then it just is like when the story is later told of how whatever, it's like.
I hate that. I've had so many experiences with that with the fucking band I was in. It was like, without telling too many personal stories, it just was a lot. I had that happen, like a lot of ideas or things that I would come up with and like kind of add to the group later would be talked about as if somebody else came up with it. And I would just like, sometimes it'd be in press or something like public. And I'd just be like, I'm not going to say anything because like on press, like, hey, that was my idea, man. You know, I'm the one who gave you that, right? It's stupid, you know, but it like that shit tore me down for a while, for sure. It's hard to feel like you're not getting the recognition for something, especially if it's something that you enjoy about yourself and you know that you do, when someone else just kind of takes it and moves on. But it's funny because on the flip side, as like being a projector, one of the most like powerful ways to actually guide another energy is to ask questions and get them to realize themselves the problem and what you're trying to do. And when they can't even detect that you're the one that gave them that idea by kind of guiding them down,
Yeah.
they identify with it themselves and they get it. And then they don't even, they move on and they grow and they expand, not correlating it with like, this person gave me that information.
Right.
And it's actually the most powerful way to get someone to not cling on to a guru or a self-help person. It's like they got it themselves, you know? So it's actually a really advanced, powerful way to do it. But you can't be in your ego with it. And like you have
Yeah, and so that's what I think it is. Because I mean, like, I don't know. I would say in some of the experiences you've had, that person, like people are maybe consciously taking your shit, you know, or like subconsciously taking your shit. But it happens a lot with you. It happens a lot with people that I know are not at all like, and it's not like taking my stuff or I own it or whatever, but it's just like I feel like I'm written out of the script in the the memory of it or whatever. And then I think it's like wrapped up in my sense of self-worth too. Cause I think I know that I'm actually really good at coming up with like innovative solutions to problems. And I think I've like stayed safe or provided, like, I have no idea how I survived being a meth addict. People just kind of kept me around because I was interesting. And then I was that. If you just had me in the environment and the shit hit the fan, I had some whack ideas, but I had a lot of like really innovative problem solving ideas. And then obviously that's what people pay me for in sessions is like, yeah, just let me play with your problem for a minute and I'll probably like figure out some way of looking at it that makes it easy to move through it. But it's something I can't remember any of the instances, and they're mostly innocuous. I mean, they're all innocuous. They're all just like things that we encounter in our lives, like with you and then with friends or whatever, that in my head, I'm like, and then I was like, what about this? And then it fucking worked and it solved it. And then when I hear the story told, it was like, yeah, and then I figured out I needed to do this. And I'm like, what? So I think it means I'm probably doing a really good job. But that is something where I've been like, am I hung up on external? Because then I would feel awkward if it's like, thank you, Jessa, for blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's like you don't want that either.
Yeah, but then it's like, oh, but the character I think I'm playing is this really useful, like, weirdo that... Because it's not just that I solve problems, it's that I solve problems from such a fucking batshit perspective. Yeah. It's the outside of the box, you know? But then, it's like, I don't know if other people see me as that because it feels like it goes, I don't know.
I always like to just think that there's somebody, like when that's happened to me, that there's somebody observing it from a higher level. And even if it's like me and this person on another level and watching it happen and be like laughing, that I'm like, somebody's recognizing that came from me, and I guess I don't need the external. Well, it doesn't make it any easier, but I feel like I've just felt at times I've done that where I'm like, nobody knows now. But then I'm like, no, I think it feels like we're on a TV screen in a higher dimension, and like everyone's watching or something. It's like, okay, I'll just accept that I'm getting validated that way.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know, because I don't even know how I feel about. You know, when I people have been like, you need to copyright that, or you need to make sure that everyone knows that's your quote or whatever. I mean, there are things I've said on podcasts that like people take all the time and I'm like, I don't know. Who the fuck knows where I got it? Mm-hmm. My brain's like a vacuum. Luckily, I don't take in a lot of content, but you know, when you have like a comedic brain, your brain is constantly vacuuming up everything that's happening so that you can kind of memify it. So it's like, I don't fucking know. Anyway, so I think fourth density is starting to come into focus for me. It is just happening to everyone. It's a different type of consciousness. And I have struggled not to moralize it in a way and connect it to it's only happening if you're doing work on yourself, which is just simply not true. It's just there will be psychopaths in the fourth density.
There are right now.
There are.
And that's what's so interesting about this book is that they're essentially trying to manipulate people that are doing work and trying to extend themselves and get into the fourth density. They're trying to control those people as well. Their main goal is to try to, harvest energy, but for beings that are going to the fourth density, they want to set up traps to be able to actually control you on that level too. So STO does exist there, but I would say that the desire for most people to start doing the self healing and the shadow work and doing all of that is they're trying to get onto an STO path because that's the way there is in. You got to go in and figure out who you are, where you're kind of being programmed and manipulated in your subconscious, release that, get control of yourself again, and start to move up in frequency and into that density, and therefore not even be puppetable, you cannot be programmed through it. You can't be controlled on that level because you've autonomized and you can see it. You're just like an empty vessel for them. You're useless to them, essentially, to beings that need your energy. Okay, so there was just this one or two more things here that I think are interesting. Okay. The intergenerational nature of abductions seems to suggest that there is a particular bloodline that is susceptible to ... and then the answer cuts them off. We have told you before the Nazi experience was a trial run, and by now you see the similarities, do you not? Yes, I do see. Now, we have also told you that the experience of the Native Americans vis-a-vis the Europeans may be a precursor and microcosm. Also, what Earthian third density does to Terran second density should offer food for thought. The way we treat animals and...
Yeah.
In other words, thou art not so special despite thy perspective, huh? And we have also warned that after conversion of Earth humans to fourth density, the Orion fourth density and their allies hope to control you there. Now put this all together and what have you. At least you should by now know that it is the soul that matters, not the body. Others have genetically, spiritually, and psychically manipulated / engineered you to be body-centric. Interesting as despite all efforts by fourth density through sixth, STO, this veil remains unbroken. Now, and then the question. Now, the big question is, what are we supposed to do with this information? As with all else, it is not what you should do with it. It is just that you have it. Is there any possibility of defeating the plans of the fourth density STS in this project? Is there any possibility, the answer is there any possibility of defeating the Spanish conquistadors and the English, French, Dutch, and German colonists? And then the question is, did they say what I think they said? Yeah, this is inexpressibly depressing. And then the answer is, and you expected a rose garden. Okay, so then it gets into, they're talking about the comets. This whole wave thing is like, you have to read the book, but there is a natural thing that occurs every so often in a cyclical pattern where there's a cometary like bombardment, a bunch of like comets come towards the earth that is a physical manifestation, but it's also like there is energy within it. So those comets, you could think of them as actual sentient beings. They're coming down to like influence and help raise the conscious, just change whatever is going on. And I think that also can depend on like when that cometary blast comes, if the collective consciousness and the earth itself is ready to enhance and go with the flow of that energy bombardment and adapt, then you experience less of a cataclysm, or the people that are in line don't experience the apocalyptic kind of thing of the cataclysm. They survive through it and adapt. And I think that's what is potentially at play here, is that depending on how much the collective can adapt to it, will kind of dictate what kind of destruction occurs or what we see as destruction.
Right. That's why the future feels like so fucking open right now.
Yeah, it's very back and forth.
So real quick, just to circle back to the last thing. So it's basically saying that there are services self beings in the fourth entity waiting for this batch of humans to also get to the fourth entity so that it can dominate and colonize them, a la what happened here to the natives, right?
Yeah.
And I guess this was on a Patreon, but I was talking about like one of the really irritating things about people on the right, for me, specifically people on the right that like aren't like Christians or whatever, like that other like they believe themselves to be anti-establishment, right? The calling everything woke is so like the sanctimony, I also can't stand it. The moral fucking grandstanding, like I've bitched about all that stuff that I also don't like that. But the throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it's time to have conversations about like specifically the things that happened here in the United States to the natives and to not understand is a complete, and then also call yourself spiritual, that right way, like that version. I get kind of how some of them ended up there. They got ostracized, and that's a whole different conversation. But like the just calling every conversation about sexism or rape culture, left wing fucking wokeism bullshit, the throwing out the baby with the bathwater is going to get your ass handed to you. Because if you don't understand the energy that founded this thing, as it starts to fall apart, you're going to be very subject to that energy. You also have been subject to that energy the entire time. If this thing was built on genocide and fucking breaking of treaties and absolute fucking treachery, it has continued to be that, because that's how energy works until you heal that energy. And until that karma is fucking like faced head on and worked through, then that energy just keeps playing on a loop. And because most of what happened was covered up for those of us who live here with propaganda, and we've been living in some propaganda world where we celebrate a day where we all got together and have a meal, but it was actually just like fucking smallpox blankets. It's like, while you're living in that fantasy propaganda world, you're living in a false matrix. And, you know, you can go like, well, the past is the past. Well, bitch, we were the fucking same souls that were in that. Reincarnation exists. So if we don't like heal and look at these things, then you're going to stay in that loop, which means if you didn't learn the lesson of that domination and fucking like brutalizing the stuff that was done in separation consciousness, which you were a part of, you were either doing it or you were a victim of it. If you don't take part in cleaning that up now, and I don't resonate, as I've said, with like the shame part or the fucking I'm good and you're bad now because you're this and I'm that. I don't resonate with all that. But if we don't like look at the energy of it, then guess who's going to be in round 2 when it's the fucking Orions versus the whatever we become after humans? You're next, because you didn't fucking like, you're still working through shit from your past lives. Most of the lessons you're learning, and you feel like, why am I learning this lesson again? It's because like your soul is like assigned to one specific thing. So if you think just like sticking your fingers in your ears and going, la, 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 I don't know, that's like woke shit, I don't care about the woke shit. You're like, okay, well, that energy still exists. It's exactly the fucking energy that this is talking about. And I think that's why they reference it a couple times. Yeah. Is like, no, you can't just will it away. You have to find it inside of yourself. Exactly. And finding it inside of yourself is the hard work of looking at the energy that founded the place where you live. Okay, sorry. So that's the end of my TED Talk.
That was great. I love it. Okay, so this is interesting too. July 22nd, 2000. We wish to review some things first. This is the Cassiopeians talking. We wish to review some things first. The concept of a master race put forward by the Nazis was merely a fourth density STS effort to create a physical vehicle with the correct frequency resonance vibration for fourth density STS souls to occupy in third density. It was also a trial run for planned events and what you perceive to be your future. This was in 2000. So then a question comes, you mean with a strong STS frequency so they can have a vehicle in third density, so to speak? Correct. Frequency resonance vibration. Very important. So that is why they are programming and experimenting. And all those folks running around who some think are programmed could be individuals who are raising their nastiness levels high enough to accommodate the truly negative STS fourth density. Sort of like walk-ins or something, only not nice ones. You do not have very many of those present yet, but that was and still is the plan of some of the fourth density STS types. Okay, it's last session. This is a new session, still in 2000. Okay, last session you brought up the subject of frequency resonance vibration. You suggested that there are certain STS forces who are developing or creating or managing physical bodies that they are trying to increase the frequency in so that they will have bodies that are wired so that they can manifest directly into third density, since that seems to be the real barrier that prevents an all-out invasion, the fact that we are in third density and they are in fourth. Now, I assume that the same function could be true for STO individuals. It seems that many individuals who have come into this time period from the future, coming back into the past via the incarnational cycle, so as not to violate free will, have carefully selected bodies with particular DNA, which they are little by little activating so that their fourth density selves, or higher, can manifest in this reality. Is it possible for those energies to manifest into such bodies which have been awakened or tuned in third density? The answer, STO tends to do the process within the natural flow of things.
STO.
STO.
Yeah.
Did I say STO?
My brain heard it as STO, so it doesn't mean anything.
STO tends to do the process with the natural flow of things. STS seeks to alter creation processes to fit their ends. Okay, then this last one is good too. I'm interested in how the 94% of the population being used as containers or parts for a new race relates to the comment that all of this will fail. How can those two things happen at the same time? Or are they mutually exclusive? Just because 94% may die does not necessarily mean success for STS forces. The energy of containers can be utilized positively or negatively. Also notice that the plans were revealed prior to the efforts of the present company. This is somebody that was there. Remember the flipping butterfly wings. That's talking about something else. Okay, there are many activities at present being driven by 4D STS to further their aims of preparing a suitable population for their benefit in numerous ways. Question, so they want a slave population, they want soldiers, they want maybe bodies that they can incarnate into themselves? Yes, all of that and more. Question, for this purpose, they're trying to fine-tune and select the proper genetics of human beings to design the best vehicle? Yes. Okay, so basically then there's some other, this is more personal stuff she's talking about. I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to read.
Did we already go through the hybrid stuff?
Yeah, kind of in the beginning, but I think there's another thing about the 94% hybrid stuff. Okay, this is good. Question, what did they mean by 94% would be used as containers? They would be used as parts, that they were containers? How would they extract that many bodies to use for parts? Answer, not the issue. Question, containers mean a holder for a soul or something. So maybe in that very early session, everything was really uneven, very jagged. So they're talking about 94% will be used to create a new race. Did they say that? And maybe what they're looking for is out of the ones that remain, they want containers for their own downloading of their evil, devious lords and masters. Is that it? The answer, close. They oftentimes, it's so funny, they never really tell you.
I think it's because we're always asking the wrong question because we're operating from limited perspective. Because I feel that a lot now when I'm maybe on a session with someone who's still kind of in the this or that or really materially minded, it's I can't actually fully articulate to you what it is because there's more categories of reason than we're using in this conversation.
Yeah. And that's what throughout these book series, it's really cool because she starts to learn that. She starts to learn how to ask the right questions. And a lot of the book, it is she's asking personal things because in 94, it's she didn't trust what it was, and as she started to just try to apply it to her own life. And so, but it's still really educational. It's very cool to see that. And then she starts to really dial in her questions near the end of the book. Okay, so to continue this, then the next question is, all our containers, 94% are used, and of course we know that they feed on pain and suffering. Can they clarify what they mean? It's a bit late, 29 years later. What's the significance of 94% of the population being used? Energy consumed and parts being used for new race. But we do not mean that physical bodies are used for parts, but rather that genetics of humanity will be modified. Plus, remember that all of these plans of 4D STS are much wishful thinking. And so they eventually goes on and they're asked, so that's their plan. Is it's not going to happen? And they say, yes, it's not going to happen.
But it's interesting. They say it's not going to happen, but then in the one part where they said, can they be stopped?
Right. because it's like, I think what this book is really getting to is it's trying to get us to a place of like seeing a natural cycle of things and not moralizing everything.
Right.
And knowing how to see the writing on the wall, see that the energy's changing. There's cycles of life that you can't change that. You can't buck against
we
the
can't
system.
send like it's not Star Wars.
Right.
But you can not be victim to it.
And it's going to happen.
You are not super identified with your body.
Right. And if you're not run by your subconscious, you can avoid it. And in that, you realize that there's a benefit to experiencing things and being in a life, being in a body when those things happen, and that you learn and grow from it. And it's so trying to fight the wrong thing is essentially what they're saying. It's like, and the thing doesn't work in some ways, I think, in this moment because of the way we've evolved collectively, and we've seemed to hit a breaking point where there's enough people aligned to that frequency that like we're on a timeline where like that agenda just doesn't work.
Right.
But that's predicated on enough people actually being able to kind of pop out of it and get there. And so that's why I think a lot of people do have this feeling of watching what's going on right now. Like it's just get your popcorn and kind of watch how this whole thing unfolds and feel like you're safe through it. It's just a matter of still having to wait for the cycle to kind of integrate and move forward.
So we'll probably have to pick this conversation up next time because I have to pee and do all these things.
This is pretty much the end of this.
There was something in there, we should have just stopped after every section, but there was something in there about hybrids that when you were reading it to me the other night made me think about fucking Bashar. Not think about fucking Bashar. Think about, I need a new adjective. Think about the guy, Bashar, talking about these fucking hybrid children. Because this hybrid thing sounds less than friendly.
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting with a lot of this, the hybridization like conversation and just aliens in general. So many people see it as without enough knowledge of like what we call alien is just like other beings we're not familiar with, and the mass variety of that. A lot of people just see aliens as like, oh, they're this higher intelligence that's going to come save us from this slavery. Not aware of the complexity of what we're calling aliens is like there are good ones, there are bad ones. There are ones that are like for evolution and enhancing others to all grow that way, and then there are some that just really want to hijack and manipulate people, and they are in another fucking paradigm of reality. They have different tech and ability to manipulate and control without you knowing. That's like, and it's like highly advanced. It's like you wouldn't be able to detect it. And so the hybridization thing can be looked at like, oh, they're hybridizing us to help us grow out of these bodies and that don't function and only last 100 years. And so they're going to help us. Hybridization is a good thing. And that's kind of the Bashar thing, has always been that. It's like, there's a hybridization programming going on. You all have children in another, that are, I mean, he's almost saying it's like they're up on spaceships that are your genetics mixed with other alien intelligence that are all good, and we're helping you, and you're soon going to meet your hybridized children.
So thank you for signing up for 23andMe, because it helped us get it done much more efficiently.
Yeah. And so that, I mean, that could be possible on some levels, that maybe there's some positive things to it, but I don't take that as like, I'm sorry if you're coming to like take my genetics without me being conscious and I can't remember, or it's like this weird abduction thing and I don't have a choice in the matter. Doesn't seem like this is some kind of like positive oriented thing. It's like, if I'm not getting transparency and you're taking my genetics and then after the fact going, yeah, so we're doing this whole thing. We had to secretly take it from you. We're going to save you. It's like, from the get-go, this feels weird.
Yeah.
And so getting into these other narratives that like Laura Knight talks about, where the hybridization thing oriented towards a race of beings that are highly advanced and developed more than we are here, but have found a end to their genetics and can't stop that and can't figure out how to keep themselves alive. And again, they're living in further expanses of time. So their lives are anywhere from like 1,000 years to 10,000 years of like one being existence. Them, hybridizing through a much more advanced system of being able to, hyperdimensionally move around the timeline, come in and take genetics, and, whether that's through like some kind of telepathy, making you forget that you had the abduction, all these other things, to save their own race. That's all pretty like manipulative and negative. And most hybridizations.
What a hellish fucking timeline to be on, is to be trapped in the material, trapped with a fear of death, and not being able to further your, because in this moment right now, it's like, yeah, well, the Homo sapiens are on their way out, in case that's not fucking obvious. Like, this race is winding down. We don't have time for this today, but and that brings no fear to me, because I'm not a Homo sapien. I'm a fucking energy being that is infinite, which is exhausting. It doesn't end, because I'm going to move on once the humans are done. But like, these guys don't know that, because they were so obsessed with the material. When this exact fork in the road that we're in right now, they trapped themselves in the material reality by choosing to only serve themselves. And
eventually that evolved into like getting rid of your soul, your individuality, and that locks you in. And then you start to, I think that's why over time, then you lose touch with emotional capacity.
Yeah. And they go the direction of like trying to extend life through tech, right? And like trying to mimic magic through tech.
Yeah, there's a huge part of this. It would have to be another time to talk about. But that's where the what's that word?
Cyborgs.
But the human
transhumanism
kind of comes from, because that's an attempt to like save oneself through tech, and that's a scary timeline too. I think you end up in a box of reality that doesn't end. It's like it's infinite through tech, but you don't have feeling. Is kind of a wild thing to imagine. But the hybridization like conversation, I think, is very nuanced. There's a lot of ways to go, because there's so much of what we do as humans. We hybridize a lot of things, like we're genetically modifying things. And there's
like the pluot is a decent hybridization. I don't know if you ever had a plum mixed with a apricot, but the pluot is a decent argument for hybridization.
Could have come up with a better name, but pluot?
Apricum?
Nope. But yeah, I think the hybridization, there's like a lot of I think at a macro level, without morality, it's like it's just experimenting with different vehicles of physical bodies to put consciousness into and drive around and have an experience. It's like, it's not a moral thing. There's like good forms of that, and then there are also, quote, bad forms that are just trying to hijack and control people through changing the genetics, which that's, again, I think how we started this whole podcast, was that predator energy like gave us its mind in an attempt to be able to control us as a genetically modified element, but it seems to be like, there's a lot of stories of it, theories of Atlantis and stuff where they were genetically modifying and tinkering with the tech of the human body to benefit. And there's probably a fluid way to do that is just advancing the tech and still keeping the individuality of the autonomy of a soul being able to come in and not be controlled. So there's like so many different ways you can go with it. But in general, I mean, a lot of the transhumanism stuff and this modifying genetics to benefit a group of beings that like relies on other people's energy, if you could genetically modify them to want to give that up, then you could extend your life for a long time by like having these beings just reincarnate and keep feeding you forever. You know, it's like a chicken in a chicken coop thing. It really is. It's fascinating to think about, but
the way that it talks, the other thing that it says in there is like, consider the way that you treat 2D beings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is crazy. So 4D, like 3D is just food for 4D.
Yeah, and there's like not a lot of moral stance about it. It's like the way they live.
And being food for the higher densities helps you wake up to the higher density. Yeah. Weirdly. Okay. I've had to pee for an hour.
I'm in a paradoxical fucking wormhole and don't know what way's up, so we should end anyways, because it's like... And that's what this wave series is, the book, like I have to often put it down and go like, where am I? What's going on? Because it is so kind of out there. But I would not recommend a book more right now than this wave series book. It'll blast your mind open. Which
wave series book? Or you mean books?
All of them. It's just the wave series, the 8 books. The first one's called Riding the Wave. You know what? I have them all right here. Let me just like list them off instead of having to put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't do show notes.
Because I think when a couple of them, if you go on Amazon, it'll like show you frequently bought together. It'll show you a couple others. But there was one of them that I had to like dig for and actually type in to find. Do I have all of them? Yeah. So the order is, the first one's called Riding the Wave. The second one is called Soul Hackers. Well, let me read the subtitle too, because it's good. Riding the Wave, The Truth and Lies About 2012 and Global Transformation. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is Soul Hackers, The Hidden Hands Behind the New Age Movement. That one's really
fun. Oh, that's the other thing I really like about her. She's just on the New Age movement.
Yeah, the entire time. And she was in it. So she has like all kinds of great perspectives about
by that I mean the system of the New Age movement, not the individuals.
Yeah. Number 3 is Stripped to the Bone, The Path to Freedom in the Prison of Life. Number 4 is Through a Glass Darkly, Hidden Masters, Secret Agendas, and a Tradition Unveiled. And then 5 and 6 is one book together. It's a little thick puppy. Petty Tyrants and Facing the Unknown, Navigating the Traps and Diversions of Life in the Matrix. The titles are also good.
Oh.
And then, what's that, 5 and 6? 7 is Almost Human, The Metaphysics of Evil. That's all the psychopathic stuff. And then the last one, which I just started, is number 8, Debugging the Universe, The Hero's Journey.
Damn. And number 9 is Wet Cloth. Jessa eventually pissed on the couch waiting for this podcast to end. All right, love you, bye.
Love you, bye.